Okay, so we're back working on the Altima 97 model, 1997 Nissan Altima. We've been tracking down a problem for weeks where the car generally runs fine, but it will just die, you know, driving, or not necessarily completely die, but well, yeah, die, but you can still start it and it will run horribly. And we thought it was an intake manifold leak, and we patched one intake leak, and we thought that fixed it, but the problem returned. And I don't know. We never really determined if it was an ignition problem or a fuel problem or whatever. But I knew that this car had a problem with a burnt connector going to the fuel pump. If you can see this, it's burnt, nasty, corroded. And I'm thinking that this connector here is the source of my problems. I'm thinking that the fuel pump isn't able to run at full power at times because of that connector. So we're engineering a solution. You can't get these plates anymore. They're no longer available, and you cannot get this plug connector from Nissan anymore, or ever, as far as I know. So you have to engineer around it. Well, this is the solution I came up with. First of all, the connector on the outside looks good. Doesn't look burnt or bad. It looks pretty good. I mean, not perfect, but I don't think that's where the problem is. I think the problem is here. The connector that's exposed to the fuel corroded. So my solution's this: solder a connector to the inside of the fuel plate, and then cut this one off, solder this connector onto it, and then, well, then just plug that in like that, and basically get rid of this piece of crap connector that's all torn up. These are waterproof, but I don't know how well they're going to do in gas. Research indicates that the plastic parts are going to be fine in the gas, but I don't know about these rubbery pieces. I guess we'll find out. But that's going to be the solution. The other solution is just solder the wires directly. If these connectors fail, that'll be the next thing. I'll take this apart again, and I'll cut these connectors off and solder the wires. But you see what I'm doing here. I'm doing a double connection instead of a single connection. 2 reds and 2 blacks, 4-pin connector, and then I'm going to solder to these 2 wires in hopes that that connector, having 2 connections for each wire, is going to make it last longer. Well, that's it. I just wanted to share, and there'll be more to this video later, but that's where we're at. I'm about to cut this connector off and solder this one on and start putting it back together. Okay, I just got through putting this car back together. The fuel pump, rear seat, and everything's back together. And I did test start it, and it did start. So now we're going to go for the first drive in it to see if we have any problems. All right, let's see if it's going to start again. Started right up. Seems to be running just fine. Put my seatbelt on. One-handed, kind of tough to do. Okay. All right. The air conditioner's working, and I want you to know it was a hot one today. Let's see how it does. The problem this car had was it would hesitate at times, not very often, but occasionally, and it would die. But it would try to run, just run crappily. But it would die as soon as you applied the brakes or the air conditioner compressor turned on or something like that. Anything that loaded the engine, it wanted to die. Happened a lot when my son was parallel parking for driving, practicing to drive, If this doesn't fix it, then I don't know. The ignition coil looks to be part of the distributor on this car. It could be that. But spark plugs, I bought NGK Iridium spark plugs for this car. So it's not spark plugs. Ignition wires have been replaced. Distributor cap and rotor have been replaced. Fuel filter's been replaced. Some fuel line has been replaced, but probably not going to be related to this. I fixed a leak on the intake manifold. The intake boot had a crack in it, and I sealed that up. Nice. That seal is holding. I've checked it. I thought the intake manifold gasket itself was a problem, but I don't think it's a problem. I think it's okay. The car runs really nice usually, and if I had an intake manifold gasket, then it would be a problem all the time. So I'm just going to drive for a little bit and get the engine up to temperature, and then I'll turn this video off if I haven't had a problem, and I'll drive it some more, and I will have another video, a conclusion to report. You know, I've driven it a long way, and either I had a problem or I didn't. And it looks like it might rain today. Very nice. We haven't had rain in a month at least, probably a month and a half. So we could sure use a little bit of rain. So far so good. I'm gonna roll the windows up. Keep an eye on that RPMs. Temperature's coming up to about its normal maximum. This car runs really cool. Either it runs really cool or the temperature sensor is shot and it's not reporting correctly, but it never gets above the halfway mark on the temperature gauge. Oh, lightning. Saw some lightning there. This took me a long time. I was originally going to drill some holes in the fuel pump plate that the connectors plug into and the fuel lines, the fuel line and return line plugs into. But I decided to just clean up the connectors with a Dremel, and solder after I cleaned off the corrosion or rust and crap that were on those terminals. Solder to it. It didn't want to take solder, but I just kept at it, and it finally did. One thing I need to be concerned about is, did I cause a leak by heating up that connector? And that's something I'll have to look at. Normally when you take the gas cap off, it really has a bunch of pressure on it. So far so good. I'm going to drive this around for a while. The car's up to temperature. Usually this problem happens when it warms up, and I think we're warmed up, so I'm going to stop the video at this point, and I'll have a conclusion, or if I have a problem, I'll be back.